What if everything you've been told about friendship and happiness is only half the truth? What if the real key to fulfillment after 70 isn't about holding on to more people, but about learning to let go? As we journey through life, our understanding of relationships evolves. The friendships that once felt essential may no longer hold the same significance. The lively gatherings, the constant need to stay connected, the pressure to belong, what if all of it was merely a chapter, not the whole story? We live in a society that glorifies busyness and social validation, making us believe that the more people we surround ourselves with, the happier we'll be. But the Buddha, in his infinite wisdom, taught us something different. You cannot travel the path until you have become the path itself. True fulfillment does not come from the number of friendships we maintain, but from the depth of peace we cultivate within. In this video, we'll explore 6 profound reasons why friendships are not as necessary after 70 through the lens of Buddhist philosophy. We'll dive into the beauty of solitude, the power of letting go, and the freedom that comes when you stop seeking validation outside of yourself. And here's something to consider. Letting go is not losing, it is gaining something even greater. A life of clarity, a life of intention, a life where your happiness is no longer dependent on anyone else. So stay with me until the end, because this may not just change the way you see friendships, it may change the way you see yourself. Let's begin. 1. You no longer need to prove yourself to anyone. For much of our lives, we are conditioned to seek validation. As young adults, we chase success, recognition, and approval. Friendships at times become a means to feel accepted, to prove that we are liked, respected, and valued. But once we reach 70, something shifts. We no longer need to impress anyone. The Buddha taught that clinging to external validation only leads to suffering. Peace comes from within. Do not seek it without. Think of Harold, a man who spent his entire career climbing the corporate ladder. Surrounded by colleagues and acquaintances, he believed that his social circle defined his worth. When he retired, many of those so-called friendships faded. At first, he tried to maintain them, but then he realized why chase relationships that were built on convenience rather than true connection. Instead, Harold turned inward. He pursued hobbies, practiced meditation, and enjoyed his own company. He no longer needed validation from others because he had found it within himself. And with that, he discovered a profound sense of peace. But Harold's journey to self-acceptance wasn't immediate. At first, he felt the void, those silent mornings without a flood of emails, the absence of invitations, the stillness where once there was a hum of activity. Doubt crept in. Had he become irrelevant? Was he truly alone? These questions weighed on him until one day, during his morning walk, he noticed something that changed his perspective entirely. He saw an elderly man sitting on a park bench, alone yet completely at ease. There was no phone in his hand, no one beside him, yet he seemed content, even joyful. Harold, driven by curiosity, approached him and struck up a conversation. The man, whose name was George, chuckled when Harold mentioned his struggles with loneliness. "I used to be just like you," George admitted. "Always needed people around to feel like I mattered. But one day, I realized that my worth isn't measured by the number of people in my life. It's measured by how at peace I am with myself." That conversation planted a seed in Harold's mind. What if he stopped worrying about how others perceived him? What if he allowed himself to simply be, without expectation, without performance, without seeking approval? So he did. He replaced networking events with long, solitary walks. He traded mindless social chatter for meaningful conversations with himself. He began journaling, reflecting on his life, and engaging in mindfulness practices. At first, the quiet felt unfamiliar. but slowly it became comforting. He no longer needed an audience to feel validated. He had become his own source of fulfillment. One evening, Harold sat by his window, watching the sunset. It was breathtaking, fiery hues painting the sky, a masterpiece unfolding in real time. He smiled, realizing something profound. This moment is beautiful, and I don't need anyone else to confirm it for me. His story echoes the wisdom of the Buddha, who once said, "Do not look for sanctuary in anyone except yourself." True peace, true happiness, true self-worth, they don't come from outside. They arise from within. So if you find yourself struggling with the idea of friendships fading as you age, remember Harold's lesson. You no longer need to prove yourself to anyone. You are already enough, exactly as you are. 2. Peace becomes more valuable than socializing. There is a Buddhist parable about a man who carried a heavy sack of stones wherever he went. One day, he met the Buddha, who asked, "Why do you carry this burden?" The man replied, "Because I always have." The Buddha smiled and said, "Then put it down." Friendships, like that sack of stones, can sometimes become burdens. While they bring joy, they can also bring obligations, calls to return, invitations to accept, expectations to meet. Many people maintain relationships not because they bring happiness, but out of habit or guilt. Take Margaret, for example. In her younger years, her days were filled with social gatherings, but over time, she noticed something. Many of these interactions left her feeling drained rather than fulfilled. At first, she dismissed the feeling, telling herself that friendships required effort and socializing was just a part of life. But deep down, she started dreading certain phone calls, feeling obligated to attend events she didn't enjoy, and engaging in conversations that no longer resonated with her. One evening, after yet another exhausting dinner where the same old gossip was recycled, Margaret sat in her living room and asked herself a simple but profound question. Why am I doing this? Was it truly bringing her happiness, or was she just going through the motions because she was afraid of what solitude might feel like? So she did something radical. She stopped. She stopped forcing herself into social interactions that didn't feel meaningful. She stopped feeling guilty for turning down invitations. Instead, she embraced solitude. At first, it was uncomfortable. The quiet felt unfamiliar, almost too still. But as days turned into weeks, she started discovering the beauty of it. She read books she had always meant to read, not worrying about whether someone would interrupt her with a phone call. She spent long, unhurried mornings sitting on her porch, listening to the birds, feeling the warmth of the sun on her skin. She took walks in nature, allowing herself to truly observe the way the leaves rustled in the wind, the way the sky changed colors during sunset. It was as if she was experiencing the world in a way she never had before. Most importantly, Margaret let go of the guilt. She realized that prioritizing her peace wasn't selfish, it was necessary. She remembered the words of the Buddha, "Silence is an empty space. Space is the home of the awakened mind," and for the first time in years, she felt awakened. As the months went by, she noticed something fascinating. Without the constant noise of social interactions, her mind became clearer. She was no longer replaying unnecessary conversations in her head, worrying about whether she had said the right thing, or feeling drained from engaging in small talk that didn't matter. Instead, her thoughts became more profound, her inner world more peaceful. She also realized that true companionship didn't always have to come in the form of human relationships. Sometimes, it was in the connection she felt with nature, the joy of creating something with her hands, the quiet wisdom she discovered in solitude. She no longer needed to be around people just to feel like she was living fully, because she was living fully, in a way that was completely her own. One afternoon, a former friend called, inviting her to a gathering. Margaret smiled and politely declined, not because she was avoiding people, but because she had something more important to do, simply be at peace with herself. So if you ever feel guilty about stepping away from social obligations, remind yourself of Margaret's story. Peace is not something to be earned from others. It is something that exists within you, waiting to be embraced. 3. Fewer friendships mean fewer disappointments. One of the hardest lessons in life is realizing that not all friendships are built to last. Over the years, we experience betrayals, one-sided relationships, and connections that fade over time. And by the time we reach 70, we see that fewer friendships don't just mean fewer obligations, they also mean fewer disappointments. Friendships, no matter how strong, come with expectations, and expectations, when unmet, lead to suffering. William, now 78, learned this the hard way. He spent years nurturing friendships, only to realize that he was often the one putting in the effort. He reached out, checked in, offered support, but many of his friends had moved on. Instead of feeling hurt, he embraced the lesson the Buddha taught: let go or be dragged. At first it stung. He would sit by the phone, hoping for a call that never came. He would reminisce about old times, wondering why certain people had disappeared from his life. But then he had an epiphany. Was he holding on to these friendships because they were truly fulfilling, or simply because they had existed for a long time? Was he valuing the quality of these relationships, or just their duration? One day, as he sat in a cafe, watching a group of younger men animatedly discussing their careers, he smiled to himself. He remembered when he too had been in their shoes, when friendships had revolved around work, ambition, and shared goals. But life had changed. He had changed. And perhaps it was time to let go of friendships that no longer aligned with who he was now. William began making different choices. Instead of chasing friendships that had run their course, he started nurturing the few that truly mattered. He reconnected with an old neighbor who shared his love for gardening. He found joy in solitary activities like painting and meditation. He realized that peace didn't come from having more people in his life. It came from having the right people, and more importantly, from being at peace with himself. He also started to recognize the beauty in impermanence, a core teaching in Buddhism. Just as the seasons change, so too do relationships. Clinging to what no longer serves us only creates suffering. When the heart is free from attachment, it knows no suffering. He had spent years grasping at fading friendships, but once he let go, he felt lighter, freer. One afternoon, an old friend called after years of silence, apologizing for losing touch. William simply smiled and responded, "I hold no resentment. We are all walking our own paths." And at that moment, he realized something profound. He no longer needed anyone to complete him. He was already whole. So if you've ever felt the disappointment of fading friendships, take a deep breath, release the attachment. Recognize that every relationship has its season, and most importantly, remember that the most valuable friendship you can ever have is the one you build with yourself. 4. Your time becomes more precious. In our younger years, time feels abundant. We spend it freely, often without a second thought. But as we age, time becomes our most valuable resource. Think of Richard, a man in his early 80s. He once thrived on social events, but over time, he began to feel different. Long conversations felt exhausting, and gatherings felt like obligations rather than joys. Then, one day he asked himself, "Is this how I want to spend my time?" The answer was no. Richard had always been the type to say yes to every invitation, believing that socializing was the key to staying active and engaged. But the truth was, many of these gatherings left him feeling more drained than fulfilled. He realized he had spent years attending events out of habit, not out of genuine enjoyment. One afternoon, after yet another gathering where conversations revolved around complaints and repetitive stories, he made a decision. He would no longer waste his time on things that didn't bring him joy. So, he shifted his focus. Instead of filling his days with empty social obligations, he started investing his time in things that truly enriched his life. He rekindled his passion for painting, something he hadn't done since his youth. He spent early mornings walking in the park, listening to the rustling leaves, feeling the warmth of the rising sun. He took up meditation, allowing his mind to settle into stillness rather than being cluttered with unnecessary chatter. One day, a friend called to invite him to a dinner party. Richard thought for a moment, then politely declined. Instead, he chose to spend the evening sipping tea on his porch, watching the sky shift colors as the sun dipped below the horizon. And as he sat there, he felt something he hadn't felt in years: peace. He remembered the Buddha's words, "The trouble is, you think you have time." The truth was, time was running out, and he wanted to spend every moment of it in a way that truly mattered. If you find yourself constantly saying yes out of obligation rather than desire, take a step back. Ask yourself, is this how I want to spend my time? Because once you start valuing your time, you begin living with true intention. 5. True companionship comes from within. Many fear that letting go of friendships will lead to loneliness, but loneliness and solitude are not the same. Eleanor learned this firsthand. At 76, she had spent much of her life surrounded by people, book club members, old colleagues, neighbors who would drop by unannounced. She always made an effort to be present, to keep up appearances, to never turn down an invitation. Yet, despite being surrounded by so many, she often felt an emptiness she couldn't explain. One day she had an epiphany. As she sat at a dinner gathering, listening to the same conversations she had heard countless times before, she asked herself, "Am I truly enjoying this?" And for the first time, she allowed herself to answer honestly, no, she wasn't. That night, Eleanor decided to make a change. Instead of filling her days with social obligations, she started embracing solitude, not out of loneliness, but out of choice. At first it was uncomfortable. The quiet felt strange. But gradually, she found herself falling into a rhythm, morning walks where she noticed the way the light filtered through the trees, afternoons spent painting without worrying about interruptions, evenings where she sat with a book, fully immersed, without the need to check her phone. One afternoon, as she sipped tea on her porch, she felt something she hadn't felt in years: peace. She no longer adjusted herself to fit in, no longer maintained relationships out of fear of missing out. She realized that true companionship wasn't about how many people were in her life. It was about how comfortable she was with herself. The Buddha once said, "If you are quiet enough, you will hear the flow of the universe. You will feel its rhythm. Go with this flow. Happiness lies ahead." And Eleanor finally understood. She wasn't alone. She had herself, and that was enough. So if you ever fear that solitude means loneliness, remember Eleanor's journey. True companionship doesn't come from others. It comes from within. And once you embrace it, the right people, the ones who truly align with your spirit, will naturally enter your life, not out of obligation, but out of genuine connection. 6. Letting go opens the door to true freedom. The greatest gift of aging is the ability to let go, to release the expectations, obligations, and burdens we once carried. James, a man in his late 70s, spent years believing that staying socially active was the key to happiness. He forced himself to keep in touch, to attend gatherings, to stay busy. But one day, he realized he wasn't enjoying it. For decades, James had maintained a packed social calendar. He would say yes to every invitation, every holiday party, every dinner gathering. Even when he didn't feel like going, he convinced himself that an active social life meant he was living fully. But deep down, he felt exhausted. Conversations often felt repetitive. Gatherings left him drained rather than energized. And over time, he noticed something troubling. Some of his friendships were held together by nothing more than obligation. One evening, as he sat in a crowded restaurant with a group of acquaintances, he found himself staring at the flickering candle in the center of the table. Laughter filled the room, but he wasn't laughing. He wasn't even fully present. He was lost in thought, questioning why he was there. And that's when it hit him. I don't need this anymore. That night, James made a bold decision. He would no longer force himself to maintain friendships that felt hollow. He would let go of the pressure to be everywhere, to be available for everyone. Instead, he would prioritize what truly mattered to him. At first, it was difficult. He hesitated before declining invitations. He worried that people would notice his absence, that they would judge him for stepping away. But something incredible happened. No one really did. Life carried on. The world didn't stop spinning just because he chose to reclaim his time. And in doing so, James discovered something extraordinary: peace. His days became simpler, but richer. Mornings were spent in quiet reflection, with a steaming cup of tea and the sound of birds outside his window. Afternoons were filled with long walks, where he truly noticed the world around him, the rustling of leaves, the way sunlight danced on the pavement, the rhythmic sound of his own footsteps. Evenings were no longer rushed. He read books that had sat untouched for years. He learned to cook meals that nourished both his body and soul. Most importantly, he no longer felt the need to perform for anyone. He no longer forced laughter, no longer kept up with small talk that didn't interest him. He was simply himself, and for the first time in a long time, that felt like enough. The Buddha taught, "You only lose what you cling to." And James finally understood. When we stop clinging to friendships out of obligation, we create space for something even greater: freedom. The freedom to live on our own terms, to invest in what truly brings us joy, to embrace the quiet beauty of life without the noise of unnecessary expectations. So if you find yourself struggling to let go, remember James's story. Releasing what no longer serves you isn't an act of isolation, it's an act of self-love. It's an invitation to live fully, authentically, and peacefully, and that in itself is the greatest freedom of all. Final thoughts. A life of inner peace. At 70 and beyond, friendships no longer define us. We are no longer bound by expectations, social norms, or the fear of loneliness. Instead, we step into the most profound chapter of life, a chapter where peace, self-awareness, and inner fulfillment take center stage. This is the stage of life where you no longer live for the approval of others, but for the deep, quiet contentment within yourself. You have walked through decades of experiences, joys, and heartaches. You have seen people come and go. You have learned that not everything or everyone is meant to stay, and that is okay. Now the real question is, what truly brings you joy? Not what used to bring you joy. Not what used to bring you joy. Not what others expect of you. But what, at this very moment, makes your soul feel light, your heart feel full, and your mind feel at peace? Is it the quiet morning walks with nothing but the sound of birds and rustling leaves? The way the sunlight dances on the water as you sit by the lake? The deep, meaningful solitude where you finally feel at home within yourself? Or is it the relationships that nourish your soul? The ones that feel effortless, that uplift you, that exist without obligation or pretense? The ones that, even in silence, bring you comfort? More importantly, are you ready to embrace the freedom that comes with letting go? The freedom to stop trying to hold on to people who have already drifted away. The freedom to release the guilt of saying no. The freedom to cherish yourself as your greatest companion. Remember, solitude is not loneliness. It is a sacred space where you rediscover who you truly are. And in that space you may find that life becomes lighter, simpler, and more meaningful than ever before. The answer to fulfillment has never been outside of you. It has always been within. And as the Buddha wisely taught, be a light unto yourself. If this message resonated with you, consider subscribing to this channel. Here, we explore the wisdom of life, the beauty of solitude, and the path to inner peace. If you found value in this, share it with someone who may need to hear these words today. And remember, your greatest peace is already within you, waiting to be embraced. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.